Mommy, why does Daddy have another mommy for us at the special house? Those 10 words from my 7-year-old son, spoken with the casual innocence of a child discussing his favorite cartoon, detonated my entire world. In that single moment, standing in our bright Phoenix kitchen on a Sunday afternoon in July 2024, I understood that everything I believed about my marriage was a carefully constructed lie. My name is Linda Martinez, and I am 48 years old. For the last 15 years, I've worked as a registered nurse at Banner Good Samaritan Medical Center, managing the cardiac care unit during evening shifts. My life had always revolved around 2 pillars: my career healing others and my family, my husband Richard, our son Tommy, who just turned 7, and our daughter Emma, 5 years old, with her father's dark eyes and my stubborn chin. We lived in a comfortable 3-bedroom house in Scottsdale, the kind with a backyard pool and a 2-car garage, the kind that represents the American dream fulfilled through hard work and partnership. Or so I thought. That Sunday began ordinarily enough. Richard had taken the kids to his mother's house Saturday afternoon, returning them Sunday around noon as usual. These weekend visits had become routine over the past 6 months. Richard claiming his aging mother needed help with yard work and errands, insisting the children would enjoy time with their grandmother. I never questioned it. Why would I? We had been married 12 years, built a life together, survived the sleepless nights of infancy and the chaos of toddlerhood. Trust was the foundation we stood on. But that afternoon, as I unpacked Tommy's overnight bag, I noticed something unsettling in his demeanor. My son, typically bursting with energy and stories after time away, seemed withdrawn. He sat at the kitchen table picking at the sandwich I'd made him, his gaze distant, his small shoulders slightly hunched. As a nurse, I'm trained to read physical cues, to notice when something is wrong even when patients insist they're fine. Tommy displayed that same incongruence, the smile that didn't reach his eyes, the forced cheerfulness masking something deeper. "Sweetheart, did you have fun at Grandma's?" I asked gently, sitting beside him and brushing his dark hair from his forehead. He nodded quickly, too quickly. "Yeah, we played games and went swimming." Swimming. I frowned. Richard's mother lived in a small condo without a pool. "Where did you go swimming?" Tommy's eyes widened slightly, the look children get when they realize they've said something they weren't supposed to. At the special house." "What special house, honey?" He glanced toward the living room where Richard had settled with the Sunday paper, then lowered his voice. "Daddy's other house, the one with the big pool and the nice lady." My heart began a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. "What nice lady?" "Miss Amy." He said the name easily, familiarly, as though she were as ordinary a fixture in his life as his kindergarten teacher. "She's really pretty, and she makes good pancakes. Better than yours, Mommy. Sorry." He offered an apologetic smile, unaware that his innocent comparison was a knife sliding between my ribs. I forced my voice to remain steady, maternal, curious, but not alarmed. "And who is Miss Amy?" Tommy shrugged, taking another bite of his sandwich. "Daddy said she's like another mommy for us when we're at the special house." The kitchen tilted. The bright Arizona sunlight streaming through the window suddenly felt harsh, exposing. I gripped the edge of the table, my nursing training the only thing keeping me from visibly unraveling in front of my child. Another mommy, the special house. Terms spoken with such casual acceptance that it was clear this wasn't new, wasn't a single occurrence. This had been happening long enough for Tommy to internalize it as normal. "How many times have you been to this special house?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Lots of times." "Maybe." He counted on his fingers, lips moving silently. "Maybe 10 times? Or more? Emma likes it there because Miss Amy has a cat. I'm not supposed to tell you, though. Daddy said it's a secret surprise." A secret surprise. Rage and nausea warred inside me. I wanted to scream, to storm into the living room and demand answers, to shake Richard until the truth spilled from him like water from a broken dam. But training and instinct prevailed. I needed information before confrontation. I needed to understand the full scope before I acted. "Tommy, can you tell me more about Miss Amy? What does she look like?" He brightened, relieved perhaps that I wasn't angry. She has yellow hair, really long, and she smells nice, like flowers. She's younger than you, I think, and she laughs a lot. Last time, she let me stay up late to watch cartoons. Each detail carved deeper. Richard had built an entire secondary life, complete with another woman, another home, weekend routines with our children. He had introduced this stranger to Tommy and Emma as a maternal figure, normalized her presence, bought their silence with treats and indulgence. The manipulation was breathtaking in its audacity. "Does Emma talk to Miss Amy too?" I managed to ask. "Yeah, Emma calls her Auntie Amy because she can't say it right yet. But Daddy corrects her sometimes and says like Mommy, so Emma knows." So Emma knew. My 5-year-old daughter, barely out of toddlerhood, had been taught to accept another woman in a maternal role. The betrayal expanded, encompassing not just my marriage, but my children's sense of security and truth. I stood abruptly, needing movement to contain the volcanic pressure building in my chest. "Thank you for telling me, sweetheart. You're not in trouble, okay? You can tell Mommy anything." He nodded, relieved, and returned to his sandwich. I walked to the kitchen sink, gripping the counter, staring blindly at the desert landscape beyond our backyard. Cacti stood sentinel in the heat, unchanged, indifferent to the detonation happening inside these walls. Richard appeared in the doorway, newspaper tucked under his arm, smiling that easy smile I'd once found comforting. "Everything okay?" I turned slowly, studying him as though seeing a stranger. His graying temples, the laugh lines around his eyes, the wedding band on his finger. All of it suddenly felt like costume jewelry, glittering but worthless. Tommy was just telling me about his weekend. "Good, good. Mom really enjoyed having them." The lie rolled off his tongue smoothly, practiced. How many lies had I swallowed over the months, trusting him implicitly? "He mentioned something about a pool," I said carefully, watching his reaction. A flicker, just a microsecond of panic crossed his features before the mask returned. "Oh, yeah, we stopped by a friend's place, let the kids cool off." "A friend?" "From work, you don't know him." Another lie, stacked neatly atop the others. I nodded slowly, offering no indication that I saw through the facade. That was nice of them. Richard kissed my forehead, the gesture now repulsive. "I'm going to catch the game. Let me know when dinner's ready." He left, oblivious, confident in his deception. And I stood there, in the ruins of everything I'd believed, understanding with crystalline clarity that this was not a mistake or a brief lapse. This was calculated, sustained, a parallel life constructed with meticulous care. He had weaponized our children's innocence, turned them into unwitting participants in his betrayal. But Richard had made one critical error. He had underestimated me. He saw a wife too busy with night shifts and household management to notice discrepancies. He saw someone too trusting, too devoted to question him. What he failed to see was the woman who had spent 15 years assessing emergencies, making life-or-death decisions under pressure, documenting evidence with precision because lives depended on accuracy. He had given me the truth through our son's innocent revelation. Now, I would use that truth to dismantle every lie he'd built, brick by carefully placed brick. But first, I needed to understand the full scope. I needed evidence, documentation, a map of this secret life before I acted. That night, after Richard fell asleep beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through possibilities and strategies. Tomorrow, I would begin my investigation. Quietly, methodically, and when I had gathered everything I needed, when there was no room for denial or manipulation, I would strike with the precision of someone who had spent a lifetime caring for others. But this time, I would be caring for myself. August in Phoenix is merciless. Temperatures climbing past 110 degrees, the asphalt shimmering with heat mirages, the air itself feeling solid against your skin. But the scorching heat outside paled compared to the controlled burn I maintained internally as I began unraveling the architecture of Richard's deception. Each day I woke, prepared breakfast, kissed my children, and went to work. all while constructing a parallel investigation that mirrored his parallel life. The first step was financial archaeology. Richard handled most of our banking, a responsibility I'd ceded years ago when the demands of nursing shifts left me exhausted. He assured me we were comfortable, showed me statements occasionally, and I trusted his management. Now that trust transformed into a tool for discovery. On a Tuesday morning after Richard left for his construction management job, I logged into our joint checking account using the laptop in our home office. The password, our wedding anniversary, unlocked instantly. Scrolling through months of transactions, I printed everything dating back a year, watching patterns emerge like constellations previously hidden in daylight. There were charges I recognized: grocery stores, gas stations, insurance payments, utility bills. But interspersed among them were transactions that stood out with glaring peculiarity once I knew to look. Monthly payments of $1,800 to Mesa Property Group, a property management company. We didn't own rental property. When I searched the company online, they specialized in luxury apartment leasing. Further down, charges at restaurants I'd never visited with Richard. Nordstrom purchases totaling $375 in March. I'd received nothing that month, not even for our anniversary. A jewelry store charge for $850 in May. I'd gotten a grocery store bouquet for Mother's Day. Each line item was a breadcrumb leading deeper into the forest of lies. I photographed every page with my phone, storing them in a password-protected folder labeled Medical Records. Innocuous enough that Richard would never think to investigate. But financial evidence alone wasn't sufficient. I needed to understand the full scope, the emotional landscape my children were navigating. That required conversations with Tommy and Emma that were delicate, strategic, never leading or alarmed. Children sense adult anxiety like animals sense earthquakes, and I couldn't risk Richard catching wind of my investigation before I'd built an ironclad case. One evening, while Richard worked late, or claimed to, I sat with Tommy during his bath time. Bubbles formed mountain ranges across the water as he played with toy boats, and I asked casually, "Do you like going to the special house?" He nodded enthusiastically. "It's fun. The pool is heated so we can swim even when it's not super hot. And Miss Amy makes really good spaghetti. She puts cheese on top, the kind that melts. How long have you been going there, buddy?" Tommy considered this, his face scrunched in concentration. Since before my birthday? Yeah, because Miss Amy gave me a Lego set, the big dinosaur one I wanted, before his birthday. Tommy had turned 7 in February. That meant this had been ongoing for at least 6 months, possibly longer. 6 months of weekends, of Richard constructing an elaborate fiction while I worked night shifts, believing my family was intact. Does Miss Amy live in that house? Sometimes. She's there on weekends when we visit. Daddy says she's really busy during the week, like you. The comparison stung. Richard positioning this woman as equivalent to me in the children's perception, normalizing her role in their lives. Emma, my 5-year-old, was less articulate but equally revealing. During a quiet afternoon while Tommy was at a friend's house, I brushed her hair and asked about the cat at Auntie Amy's place. Her face lit up. "Mr. Whiskers. He's orange and so soft. He sleeps on my lap when we watch movies. Auntie Amy says he loves little girls." "Do you see Auntie Amy a lot?" "Every time we visit Grandma," Emma answered brightly, not understanding that she just confirmed Richard's alibi was entirely fabricated. His mother wasn't involved at all. The weekend visits were exclusively to this other house, this other life. "What do you and Auntie Amy do together?" "We bake cookies sometimes, and she reads me stories before nap time. She has a really pretty bedroom with pink curtains. Daddy says one day we might have rooms there too, special rooms just for me and Tommy." The floor seemed to drop beneath me. Special rooms. Richard wasn't just maintaining an affair. He was preparing to transition our children into this alternative family structure, inch by inch, normalizing it until the shift became seamless. The manipulation was breathtaking in its cruelty and calculation. I held Emma close, breathing in her strawberry-scented shampoo, fighting the urge to weep into her hair. She couldn't see my devastation. Neither could Tommy. They needed their mother strong, composed, capable of protecting them from the psychological warfare their father had waged, using their innocence as ammunition. That weekend, Richard announced another visit to Mom's place. I smiled, nodded, helped pack their overnight bags. But this time, after they left, I didn't stay home. I drove to Richard's mother's condo in Sun City, a 40-minute journey through desert sprawl, and knocked on her door. Dorothy Martinez answered with surprise and warmth. "Linda, what a lovely surprise. Come in, it's too hot to stand outside." Inside her tidy living room, surrounded by family photos and the faint scent of lavender air freshener, I asked casually, "Are Richard and the kids not here yet? I thought I'd join you all today." Dorothy's confusion was genuine, immediate. "Richard and the kids? Honey, I haven't seen them in over a month. Last time was for my birthday in June. Is everything all right?" The confirmation settled into my bones like ice, despite the desert heat outside. "Yes, everything's fine. I must have gotten my dates mixed up. These nursing shifts scramble my brain sometimes." Dorothy laughed, sympathetic, and offered me iced tea. We chatted for 20 minutes about nothing important, all while I screamed internally. Richard had been lying not just to me, but using his mother's name as cover, confident I'd never verify. The audacity was staggering. Driving home, I felt the full weight of the deception. This wasn't a brief affair, a moment of weakness, a mistake to be forgiven and forgotten. This was architectural, a structure built deliberately, room by room, lie by lie, using our children as both tools and victims. Back in our home office, I dove deeper into financial records, cross-referencing dates and locations. The Mesa Property Group address led me to an upscale apartment complex near Tempe Town Lake. 2-bedroom units started at $1,800 monthly. I drove there one afternoon, parked across the street, and simply watched. The complex was beautiful. Palm trees, pristine landscaping, gated entry with security codes. I couldn't enter without tipping my hand, but I photographed the building, the address, the property management sign. Each piece of evidence joined the growing archive on my phone and in printed form hidden inside a medical textbook on my office shelf. The restaurant charges led me to romantic establishments Richard and I hadn't visited in years. Candlelit Italian places, upscale steakhouses, the kind of venues that signaled courtship, not casual dining. I imagined him there with her, this Amy Carter whose name I'd gleaned from Emma's innocent references, laughing over wine while I worked overnight shifts monitoring cardiac patients. Jewelry purchases in May. Was she wearing the necklace or bracelet he'd bought with our money, tokens of affection I'd been denied? The Nordstrom charge in March, clothing for her, outfits for dates I knew nothing about. The financial trail painted a picture of sustained investment, both monetary and emotional. Richard hadn't stumbled into this. He'd built it deliberately, budget line by budget line, weekend visit by weekend visit, introducing our children gradually so they'd accept her presence as normal, natural, deserved. But he'd made mistakes. He'd underestimated Tommy's innocent chattiness, Emma's openness, and most critically, he'd underestimated me. He saw a wife too busy, too trusting, too exhausted from night shifts to notice discrepancies. What he failed to recognize was the woman trained to spot inconsistencies, to document with precision, to remain calm under pressure while chaos erupted around her. By the end of August, I possessed a comprehensive map of his deception. Financial records showing the apartment, restaurants, gifts, verbal confirmations from our children about the house, the pool, Amy's presence, verification from his mother that she hadn't seen them in months. The evidence was damning, indisputable, and growing daily. Yet I maintained perfect composure at home. I cooked dinners, folded laundry, smiled when Richard kissed me goodbye. At night I lay beside him, this stranger wearing my husband's face, and planned my next moves with surgical precision. He believed himself safe, his secret intact. That false security would be his downfall. September arrived with slightly cooler temperatures and a clarity of purpose that had crystallized during my August investigation. Evidence alone, however damning, wasn't enough. I needed professional guidance to transform documentation into action, to protect not just my dignity, but my children's futures and my financial stability. Richard had weaponized our family structure. I would respond with the precision of legal and investigative expertise. My first call was to Jennifer Walsh, a family law attorney whose name I'd obtained through a colleague at the hospital. Jennifer specialized in high-conflict custody cases, exactly what I anticipated this would become. I scheduled a consultation during my lunch break, meeting her at a discreet office in downtown Phoenix, where tinted windows and private parking ensured confidentiality. Jennifer was in her mid-50s, with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. I spread my printed bank statements, photographs of the apartment complex, and notes from conversations with Tommy and Emma across her desk. She reviewed everything methodically, her expression growing more serious with each page. "Mrs. Martinez," she finally said, "this isn't just marital infidelity. Your husband has been exposing your minor children to an extramarital relationship without your knowledge or consent, introducing another woman as a parental figure, and using marital funds to support this secondary household. That's parental alienation, financial misconduct, and grounds for an extremely favorable custody arrangement." Her words validated what I'd instinctively known, but needed confirmed by someone versed in Arizona family law. What should my next steps be? Documentation is excellent, but we need more concrete proof. I'm going to recommend a private investigator, someone who can verify the apartment lease, photograph your husband and this woman together, establish patterns of visitation. Arizona is a no-fault divorce state, but judges absolutely consider parental conduct when determining custody. If we can prove he's deliberately involved your children in deceptive circumstances, you'll have significant leverage. She provided contact information for Marcus Chen, a former police detective turned private investigator. Marcus is thorough, discreet, and his reports hold up in court. Tell him I referred you. The consultation cost $300, money I withdrew from my personal checking account, a separate account I'd maintained from my nursing salary, something Richard barely acknowledged existed. That account, modest as it was, would become my financial lifeline. 2 days later, I met Marcus Chen at a coffee shop in Scottsdale. He was younger than I expected, perhaps 40, with an intensity that suggested he took his work seriously. I provided copies of everything: financial records, the apartment address, Richard's work schedule, typical weekend patterns. "I need photographs of him with this woman, documentation of the children visiting the apartment, anything that proves this has been ongoing," I explained, my voice steady despite the humiliation of hiring someone to surveil my own husband. Marcus nodded, making notes. "I'll start this weekend. Based on patterns you've described, if he takes the kids Saturday morning, I'll follow from your residence to the apartment. I'll document entry times, photograph who comes and goes, verify the woman's identity if possible. Give me 3 weekends, and you'll have everything you need." His fee was $1,500, payable in installments. I withdrew the first $500 from my account that afternoon, cash that left no digital trail Richard could discover. Simultaneously, I began quietly protecting our shared assets. Arizona is a community property state, meaning everything acquired during marriage belongs equally to both spouses, but that also meant Richard could drain accounts, sell property, or create debt I'd be liable for. I needed safeguards before he realized I knew. I consulted with a financial advisor recommended by Jennifer, explaining my situation in clinical terms. Together we identified which assets were solely mine: my retirement account from the hospital, funds inherited from my father years ago that I'd kept separate, and my personal checking account. These totaled approximately $43,000, not substantial but enough to survive independently if necessary. The advisor helped me ensure these accounts were properly documented as separate property, gathering paperwork that proved their origins predated the marriage or came from inheritance. Any commingling with joint funds would complicate matters, so we verified every deposit, every transaction, building an ironclad paper trail. For shared assets, our house, Richard's retirement account, joint savings, I couldn't act unilaterally without tipping my hand. But I documented everything: mortgage statements, property tax records, account balances, vehicle titles. When the time came for asset division, I'd have complete financial transparency while Richard scrambled to explain the 18 months of apartment rent he'd paid with marital funds. Yet the most crucial element of my preparation involved Tommy and Emma. They were innocents caught in their father's manipulation, and I couldn't proceed without considering their psychological welfare. In early September, I scheduled appointments with Dr. Rebecca Chen, a child psychologist specializing in family trauma. Dr. Chen's office was warm, filled with toys and soft lighting designed to comfort anxious children. I met with her alone first, explaining the situation without the children present. I need to understand how this has affected them, and I need strategies for helping them process what's coming. When the truth emerges, they'll realize their father has been lying, that the woman they've been taught to trust was part of a deception. I can't predict how they'll react. Dr. Chen listened carefully, her empathy evident, but her advice grounded in professional expertise. Children are remarkably resilient, but they need stability and honesty within their developmental capacity. Tommy, at 7, will understand betrayal more concretely than Emma. She's 5. Her grasp will be more about routine disruption than moral complexity. The key is maintaining your role as their secure base while their father's falls apart. She recommended I bring them in for initial sessions, framed as talking time with a nice doctor rather than therapy, which might alarm them. Over 2 appointments in mid-September, Dr. Chen gently explored their feelings about the special house, their relationship with Auntie Amy, and their understanding of family structure. Her observations confirmed what I feared. Tommy showed signs of confusion about loyalty, occasionally contradicting himself when describing weekends, clearly coached on what to share and what to keep secret. Emma, younger and less filtered, exhibited anxiety about making Daddy upset if she talked about certain things. The psychological manipulation ran deeper than I'd realized. Richard hadn't just introduced them to his mistress. He'd actively conditioned them to maintain secrecy, creating internal conflict between honesty with their mother and obedience to their father. Dr. Chen's written assessment would be powerful evidence in custody proceedings. Marcus provided his first report in late September after 3 weekends of surveillance. The photographs were devastating in their mundane domesticity: Richard's truck in the apartment complex parking lot, him leading Tommy and Emma through the security gate, a blonde woman in her early 30s answering the door with a smile, all of them entering together. Subsequent images showed them at the pool, at a nearby park, loading groceries from Richard's truck. One photograph captured Amy's hand on Richard's lower back as they walked, a gesture of casual intimacy that spoke of comfort and familiarity. Another showed Emma on Amy's lap during what appeared to be a poolside lunch. Tommy throwing a ball with Richard while Amy watched from a lounge chair, looking every bit the picture of blended family harmony. Marcus had also obtained Amy Carter's background: 32 years old, worked as a dental hygienist, no prior marriages, no children of her own. He'd verified the apartment lease was in Richard's name alone, signed 14 months prior, even longer than I'd estimated. 14 months of double life, of rental payments totaling over $25,000 siphoned from our family budget. The report was comprehensive, time-stamped, documented with license plates, addresses, and cross-reference dates. It was irrefutable proof of sustained deception involving our children. By the end of September, I had assembled a complete dossier: financial records spanning 18 months, private investigator reports with photographic evidence, psychological assessments of the children, documentation of my separate property, and legal consultation outlining my rights and options. Every piece interlocked, creating a narrative Richard couldn't deny or manipulate. Yet assembling evidence was only half the battle. I still needed to decide when and how to act. Confrontation would detonate our family, traumatize our children, and force decisions about custody, divorce, and the fundamental restructuring of our lives. The weight of that responsibility pressed on me during long night shifts at the hospital, watching cardiac monitors while my own heart fractured quietly. But I couldn't remain paralyzed by fear or grief. Richard had made his choices over 14 months, every weekend, every lie, every manipulation of our children's trust. Now I had to make mine, not from vengeance, but from the necessity of protection. My children deserved a parent who chose truth and their welfare over comfortable fiction. They deserved better than being pawns in their father's elaborate deception. October would bring confrontation, but it would be on my terms, with irrefutable evidence, legal protection, and professional support already in place. Richard had built his house of lies brick by brick. I would dismantle it with the precision of someone who'd spent months studying its architecture. The first week of October, I began moving pieces into position with the methodical care of a chess player 3 moves from checkmate. Every action was calculated, every word measured, every emotion channeled into purpose rather than rage. Richard noticed nothing. His confidence in his deception remained absolute, which made my task simultaneously easier and more infuriating. On a Tuesday morning while Richard was at work and the children at school, I rented a safety deposit box at a bank branch across town, far from our usual financial institutions. Into that fireproof vault, I placed copies of everything: bank statements, Marcus's investigator reports with photographs, Dr. Chen's psychological assessments, property records, and my attorney's preliminary custody recommendations. The originals remained hidden in my office, but this redundancy ensured Richard couldn't destroy evidence even if he discovered my investigation. Next, I quietly transferred funds from our joint savings into my separate account. Not everything, which would trigger immediate suspicion, but $5,000 withdrawn in increments over 3 days, disguised among legitimate household expenses. I documented each transfer meticulously, prepared to justify them as personal emergency funds if questioned. Arizona's community property laws meant I had equal right to marital assets, but I moved cautiously, aware that aggressive financial maneuvers before filing could be viewed unfavorably by judges. That same week, I began removing items of sentimental and legal importance from our house. My grandmother's jewelry, stored carelessly in a bedroom drawer, went into the safety deposit box. Original copies of the children's birth certificates, our marriage license, my nursing credentials, and the deed to property my father had left me in New Mexico, all migrated to secure locations Richard couldn't access. I photographed our home room by room, documenting furnishings, electronics, art, creating a visual inventory that would prove what existed before any potential asset stripping. The children's routines continued unchanged on the surface, but I began subtly preparing them for disruption. During bedtime stories, I wove in themes about change being difficult but sometimes necessary, about how families can look different but still be full of love, about always having a safe space with Mommy no matter what happened. Tommy absorbed these messages quietly, his perceptive eyes occasionally studying my face as though trying to decode the subtext. Emma simply snuggled closer, trusting completely. Dr. Chen had scheduled additional sessions for both children in mid-October, appointments I framed as checkups for feelings rather than therapy for family trauma. Tommy enjoyed talking to Dr. Rebecca, who had building blocks and never made him feel like something was wrong. Emma loved the art supplies in the playroom, drawing pictures of our family that sometimes included Auntie Amy and sometimes didn't, her 5-year-old brain unconsciously processing the contradictions she'd been taught to accept. The hardest preparation was emotional. I rehearsed the confrontation in my mind during long night shifts, imagining Richard's reactions: denial, anger, manipulation, perhaps even attempts to turn blame back on me. I anticipated every deflection, every excuse, and prepared responses grounded in irrefutable evidence rather than emotion. Jennifer had warned me, "Don't let him make this about your feelings or perceived failures as a wife. This is about his choices, his deception, and most critically, his exposure of your children to an inappropriate situation. Stay factual, stay calm, and let the evidence speak." On Thursday, October 10th, I took a personal day from the hospital, my first unscheduled absence in 3 years. I told Richard I was attending a nursing conference in Tucson, even showing him a fabricated registration confirmation I'd created. He barely glanced at it, kissing me absently before heading to work, probably relieved to have an evening free for whatever he actually did on his supposed late nights at the construction site. Instead, I drove to Jennifer's office for our final preparation meeting. She reviewed the divorce petition she'd drafted, the emergency custody motion citing parental alienation and exposure to inappropriate adult relationships, and the financial disclosures that highlighted Richard's diversion of marital funds. Everything was ready for filing the moment I gave the word. Once you confront him, he'll likely become defensive, possibly aggressive, Jennifer cautioned. I recommend doing it in a controlled environment, perhaps with a third party present, and having somewhere to go if things escalate. You're not in physical danger based on his history, but emotional volatility is almost guaranteed. I nodded, my jaw tight. I want to do it at home, in our living room, with the children at school. I want him to see the evidence, understand that I know everything, and realize he has no room to maneuver. Then I want him to leave. Be prepared for him to refuse initially. You can't legally force him from the marital home without a court order, which we won't have until we file. But the psychological impact of your knowledge might motivate voluntary departure. That evening, I returned home before Richard, preparing dinner with mechanical efficiency. When he arrived, still playing the role of devoted husband, I smiled and asked about his day. He complained about permit delays on a commercial project, oblivious to the fact that tomorrow his entire world would collapse. Friday morning, October 11th, arrived with crystalline autumn clarity. I took the children to school personally, hugging them both longer than usual. Tommy sensed something, his small hand gripping mine tightly. "Mommy, are you okay?" "I'm perfect, sweetheart. I love you so much. Remember that, okay? No matter what happens, Mommy loves you and Emma more than anything in the universe." He nodded seriously, then ran to join his friends. Emma blew kisses from the kindergarten doorway, her gap-toothed smile radiant with innocence. I was about to shatter on her behalf. Back home, Richard was in the shower, preparing for work. I went to my office, retrieved the folder I'd compiled, and carried it to the living room. My hands were steady, my breathing controlled. 15 years of nursing emergencies had trained me for high-stakes moments. This was simply another crisis requiring calm competence. When Richard came downstairs, dressed in his usual khakis and work polo, he found me sitting on the couch, the folder on the coffee table between us. His smile faltered at my expression. "We need to talk," I said quietly. "Sit down. Linda, I'm going to be late." "Sit down." My voice carried the authority I used with non-compliant patience. Richard sat, confusion morphing into wariness. I opened the folder, placing the first document in front of him. "This is the lease agreement for an apartment at Mesa Heights. It's in your name, signed 14 months ago, monthly rent of $1,800. Care to explain?" His face drained of color. "Linda, I can—" "No." I cut him off, placing the next document down. "These are bank statements showing payments to that address, along with charges at romantic restaurants, jewelry stores, and clothing boutiques. None of those purchases were for me or our children." Richard's mouth opened, closed, his hands gripping his knees. I continued relentlessly, laying down Marcus's surveillance photographs one by one. Richard entering the apartment with Amy, the children playing at the pool, Amy's hand on his back, Emma on her lap. "This is Amy Carter, 32 years old, dental hygienist, the woman you've been introducing to our children as a secondary maternal figure, the woman you've been sustaining with marital funds while lying to me for over a year. Linda, please, let me explain." His voice cracked, desperation bleeding through. I placed down Dr. Chen's report. "This is a psychological assessment of Tommy and Emma. It documents the confusion, anxiety, and emotional manipulation they've experienced being taught to keep secrets from their mother, being told another woman is like Mommy, being conditioned to accept your lies as normal." Richard's head dropped into his hands. "It wasn't supposed to hurt them. I never meant—" "You never meant what?" My voice remained eerily calm, despite the inferno inside. "You never meant to destroy our family? You never meant to steal thousands of dollars to fund your affair? You never meant to weaponize our children's innocence?" He looked up, tears streaming, and for a moment I almost felt sympathy. Then I remembered Tommy's confused face, Emma's casual acceptance of Auntie Amy, the 14 months of calculated deception, and my heart hardened into something unbreakable. I'm filing for divorce, Richard. I'm seeking primary custody based on your conduct, and I will ensure every person in our lives knows exactly why this marriage ended. You don't get to control the narrative anymore. You don't get to lie your way out of consequences. Linda, please, we can fix this. I'll end things with Amy. I'll do counseling, whatever you want. I stood, gathering the documents. I don't want anything from you except honesty for our children and fair division of assets you haven't already stolen. You have until this evening to pack your essentials and leave. If you're not gone, I'll file for an emergency protective order citing emotional abuse of minors. You can't kick me out of my own house. This is our house, and you've forfeited any moral right to stay in it. Leave, Richard, while you still have a shred of dignity left. I walked away, leaving him sitting in the wreckage of his lies, and locked myself in our bedroom. Only then, alone, did I allow myself to shake. Richard didn't leave that evening. Instead, he paced our house like a caged animal, alternating between pleading and justification, his voice carrying through walls I'd locked between us. I remained in the bedroom, door secured, listening to him cycle through the predictable stages of a cornered liar, denial already shattered by evidence, bargaining desperately for second chances he hadn't earned, anger simmering beneath forced remorse. Linda, open the door. We need to talk like adults. His knuckles rapped against the wood, insistent but not violent. Richard had never been physically aggressive, but emotional manipulation was his native language, and I refused to give him an audience for another performance. There's nothing to discuss, I called back, my voice steady. You have until tomorrow morning. If you're still here when I bring the children home, I'm calling my attorney and requesting an emergency hearing. Silence followed, then footsteps retreating down the hallway. I heard drawers opening in the guest room, the scrape of luggage being pulled from closets. Part of me had expected him to dig in, to refuse departure out of stubbornness or entitlement. But perhaps seeing the documentation, understanding the depth of my preparation, had finally penetrated his delusion that this could be managed or smoothed over with the right words. By morning, his truck was gone from the driveway. Inside, the guest room showed signs of hasty packing, drawers left half open, hangers scattered on the bed, the closet noticeably emptier. He'd taken clothes, toiletries, his laptop, but left behind the trappings of our shared life. Wedding photos still on the dresser, his favorite coffee mug in the kitchen cabinet, the golf clubs he'd used as props for alibis. I texted Jennifer. He's out, ready to file. Her response came within minutes. Coming to your house at noon with papers. We'll go to the courthouse together. Picking up Tommy and Emma from school that afternoon required a performance I wasn't sure I could sustain. They bounded into the car with their usual energy, Tommy clutching a completed math worksheet he was proud of, Emma singing a song she'd learned in music class, normal, ordinary, innocent, and I was about to detonate their normalcy. "Where's Daddy?" Tommy asked as we pulled into our driveway, and he noticed Richard's truck absent from its usual spot. "Daddy is staying somewhere else for a while," I said carefully, using the language Dr. Chen had coached me on. "Mommy and Daddy are having some grown-up problems we need to work through. It doesn't change how much we both love you." Emma's face crumpled immediately. "Is Daddy coming back?" "Not right now, sweetheart, but you'll still see him, I promise. This isn't about you or Tommy. You didn't do anything wrong." Tommy, perceptive as always, studied me with those dark eyes that missed nothing. "Is it because of Miss Amy?" The question landed like a punch. I pulled into the garage, turned off the engine, and twisted to face them both. "Yes, honey, it's partly because of Miss Amy. Daddy made some choices that weren't okay, and now things have to change. But we're going to be all right. Our family is going to look different, but you're safe and loved, and nothing changes that." Emma burst into tears, and Tommy's lip trembled before he mastered himself with visible effort, trying to be brave. I gathered them both close, their small bodies pressed against mine in the confined space of the car, and let them cry while my own tears finally spilled over. Inside, I made their favorite dinner, macaroni and cheese with dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets, and let them watch extra television, rules temporarily suspended in the face of emotional trauma. They needed comfort, routine disrupted enough without me enforcing bedtime strictness. Dr. Chen had scheduled an emergency session for Monday. Until then, I would provide as much stability as possible while their world tilted sideways. That evening, after the children finally slept, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and composed an email I'd been drafting mentally for days. The recipient list included Richard's parents, his brother, my own sister in California, and several close friends who'd known us as a couple for over a decade. The message was factual, devoid of melodrama, but unflinching in its honesty. I'm writing to let you know that Richard and I are divorcing. Over the past 14 months, he has maintained a relationship with another woman, introduced her to our children without my knowledge or consent, and diverted significant marital funds to support this secondary household. I have documented evidence of this deception. I wanted you to hear the truth from me directly, rather than through rumors or Richard's version of events. Tommy and Emma are my priority during this difficult transition, and I ask for your understanding and support. I hit send before I could second-guess the decision. Within an hour, my phone exploded with responses: shock, support, outrage on my behalf, and from Richard's mother, Dorothy, a heartbroken message. Linda, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Those poor babies. Please let me know how I can help. Richard's brother called, his voice tight with anger. Did he really use Mom as an alibi while taking the kids to see his girlfriend? Yes. Your mother hadn't seen them in months whenever he claimed they were visiting her. Jesus Christ. Linda, I'm so sorry. If there's anything you need, anything, you call me. The solidarity was unexpected and deeply comforting. I'd feared judgment, whispers that perhaps I'd driven him to infidelity through inadequacy or neglect. Instead, the people who mattered rallied, recognizing that exposing children to deception was indefensible regardless of marital problems. 2 days later, Jennifer and I sat across from Richard and his hastily retained attorney in a conference room that smelled of stale coffee and anxiety. Richard looked haggard, his usual confidence replaced by hollow-eyed exhaustion. His lawyer, a younger man whose inexperience showed in his nervous shuffling of papers, tried to frame the situation as a marital indiscretion that shouldn't affect custody arrangements. Jennifer dismantled that position with surgical precision. Your client didn't commit a marital indiscretion. He sustained a 14-month relationship, introduced the children to his paramour as a maternal figure, used marital funds to support her, and coached the children to keep secrets from their mother. That's parental alienation, financial misconduct, and profoundly poor judgment regarding minor children's emotional welfare. She placed the evidence before them. Marcus's reports, Dr. I. Chen's assessment, financial documentation showing $25,000 in diverted funds. Richard's attorney paled as he reviewed it, clearly unprepared for the comprehensiveness of our case. My client is willing to negotiate reasonable custody and financial terms, Jennifer continued, but primary physical custody will remain with Mrs. Martinez. Mr. Martinez can have supervised visitation initially, transitioning to regular visitation once a parenting coordinator and therapist certify that he's addressed the damage caused. Richard's voice, when he finally spoke, was barely audible. Supervised visitation? They're my kids, Linda. I met his gaze without flinching. They're our kids, and you used them as props in your deception. You taught them to lie to me. You exposed them to your affair without considering the psychological impact. Supervised visitation protects them while you prove you can prioritize their welfare over your desires. That's not fair. Fair? My composure cracked slightly. Was it fair to steal from our family budget to wine and dine your girlfriend? Was it fair to let Tommy and Emma think they had a second home, a second family, while I worked night shifts believing we were secure? Don't talk to me about fair, Richard. His attorney called for a brief recess. When they returned, Richard had agreed to the terms: primary custody to me, supervised visitation for him twice weekly with a transition plan contingent on therapy compliance, equitable division of assets minus the funds he'd diverted, and child support at statutory levels. The final piece remained unresolved. Amy Carter herself. Jennifer suggested I reach out directly, not for confrontation, but clarification. She's been painted as a homewrecker, but she may not know the full story. Richard might have lied to her too. 2 weeks after the confrontation, I drove to the dental office where Amy worked, asking at reception to speak with her during her lunch break. She emerged warily, recognizing me instantly from photos she'd surely seen in Richard's supposedly separate life. We sat in my car in the parking lot, two women whose lives had intersected through one man's lies. Up close, Amy was younger than she'd appeared in surveillance photos. Her blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her blue scrubs rumpled from morning appointments. "I'm not here to attack you," I began. "I need to understand what Richard told you about his situation." Amy's eyes welled immediately. "He said he was divorced, that it was finalized 2 years ago, and you'd moved on. He showed me papers. I didn't question them, because why would I? When I met your kids, he said it was his custody weekend, and you were okay with me being around because everyone had moved forward maturely." The breath left my lungs. Of course, Richard had lied to her too, weaving an alternative reality where he was the divorced dad building a new life rather than the married man betraying his family. We weren't divorced. We were living together as a married couple the entire time he was with you. Amy's hands covered her face. Oh my God, those poor children. They must be so confused. I really thought I was helping integrate into a blended family. I never would have. She broke down, sobs racking her thin shoulders. In that moment, I felt a strange kinship with this woman, who'd also been deceived, used as an unwitting accomplice in Richard's fantasy life. "I believe you," I said quietly. "You didn't know. But my children were taught to call you like mommy. They're in therapy now, processing betrayal they don't fully understand. I need you to disappear from their lives completely. No contact with Richard involving them, no attempts to reach out as they get older. Can you do that?" Amy nodded violently. "I already ended things when the truth came out. I would never interfere. Please tell them I'm sorry. I know they won't understand. But someday when they're older, just tell them I'm sorry." I drove away, feeling no satisfaction, only exhaustion and the hollow ache of futures irrevocably altered by one man's selfish choices. December in Phoenix brings relief from the brutal summer heat. Temperatures settling into the 70s, the kind of weather that makes living in the desert tolerable. 2 months had passed since the confrontation that fractured our family. And in that time, I'd learned that survival isn't a single heroic moment, but countless small decisions to keep moving forward when everything in you wants to collapse. Our house felt different now, quieter without Richard's presence, but also lighter, as though the weight of lies had been physically removed along with his belongings. Tommy and Emma adjusted in the complicated, non-linear way children do. Some days seemingly fine, other days asking questions that broke my heart. Why did Daddy lie to us? Is Miss Amy our fault? Will Daddy ever live here again? Dr. Chen continued weekly sessions with both children, helping them process the betrayal through age-appropriate frameworks. Tommy, at 7, grasped the concept of broken promises and lost trust, though he struggled with conflicted loyalty, loving his father while recognizing his father had done wrong. Emma, barely 5, understood mainly that Daddy made mistakes, and now there were new rules about when they saw him. The supervised visitation arrangement proved both necessary and painful. Richard met with Tommy and Emma at a family visitation center twice weekly, with trained monitors ensuring interactions remained appropriate. Initially, the children were excited to see him, but confusion emerged when they asked about the special house, and Richard, under supervision, had to explain it was gone now, that Miss Amy wouldn't be part of their lives anymore. "But you said she was like our mommy," Tommy had said during one session, his voice carrying the wounded bewilderment of a child realizing adults lie. The visitation supervisor documented everything, including Richard's inadequate response and Tommy's resulting withdrawal. These reports would determine when, or if, Richard graduated to unsupervised visits. For my part, I focused on rebuilding stability. My nursing shifts returned to their regular rhythm, though I'd reduced to part-time temporarily to be more available during this transition. The hospital was understanding, allowing me flexibility that many single mothers don't receive. My colleagues knew the broad outlines of my situation. Word travels fast in close-knit workplaces, and offered quiet support through covered shifts and occasional dinner deliveries. Financially, the divorce settlement proved more favorable than I'd hoped. Jennifer had negotiated return of the $25,000 Richard diverted to the apartment, though paid out over time since he couldn't produce it immediately. Child support was set at $1,200 monthly, and I retained primary ownership of our house since I'd contributed inheritance money to the down payment years ago. Richard kept his retirement accounts, I kept mine, and we split other assets equitably. The money mattered less than the principle. Recognition that his choices had consequences, that stealing from our family to fund an affair had tangible costs he'd be paying for years. He'd moved into a modest apartment near his construction office, his lifestyle significantly downgraded from the fantasy he'd tried to maintain. What surprised me most was the support from unexpected quarters. Dorothy, Richard's mother, called weekly to check on the children and often on me. "What my son did is unforgivable," she'd said during one conversation, her voice thick with shame and sorrow. "You're still family to me, Linda. Those babies are my grandchildren, and you're the parent holding them together. If I can help in any way, please let me." That grace, extended despite blood ties, meant more than she probably realized. Richard's brother maintained contact as well, taking Tommy to baseball games occasionally and providing a male role model untainted by betrayal. My own sister flew in from California for a week in November, helping establish new routines and simply being present so I didn't carry everything alone. The hardest moments came at night, after the children slept, when silence amplified the reality that I was now genuinely alone at 48, starting over in ways I'd never anticipated. Grief for the marriage I'd believed in coexisted uneasily with relief at escaping the lies. Some nights I mourned the lost future, growing old together, seeing grandchildren, the partnership I'd invested 12 years building. Other nights I felt only fury at the years stolen, the trust weaponized, the children used as pawns. Dr. Chen recommended individual therapy for me as well, pointing out that parenting traumatized children while processing my own trauma was unsustainable without support. I resisted initially, nursing culture prizes stoicism, solving problems rather than dwelling on feelings. But eventually, I began seeing a therapist named Michael Torres, who specialized in betrayal trauma and family reconstruction. Michael helped me understand that my response, the investigation, the strategic planning, the controlled confrontation, wasn't cold or calculating, but a form of self-protection entirely appropriate given the circumstances. "You didn't have the luxury of falling apart immediately," he explained during one session. "Your children needed you functional, and you rose to that. Now you need to process what happened while you were holding everything together." Processing meant acknowledging the anger I'd suppressed during months of investigation. It meant crying in ways I'd denied myself while maintaining composure for Tommy and Emma. It meant recognizing that Richard's betrayal wasn't a reflection of my inadequacy, but of his character flaws, his selfishness, his willingness to deceive, his failure to consider consequences for anyone but himself. As December progressed, small rituals emerged that signaled our new normal. Friday movie nights became sacred, just the three of us with popcorn and Disney films Emma chose. Sunday mornings meant pancakes I made with Tommy's help, the kitchen filled with flour dust and laughter. We adopted a rescue dog named Biscuit, a golden retriever mix whose boundless affection provided comfort during hard moments. The children asked occasionally about Miss Amy, usually in the context of remember when stories that mixed truth and confusion. I answered honestly but gently, explaining that sometimes adults make mistakes that hurt the people they love. And Miss Amy was part of a mistake Daddy made that couldn't continue. "But she was nice to us," Emma said once, her 5-year-old sense of fairness struggling with complexity. She probably was nice, sweetheart. But the situation wasn't fair to anyone, including her. Sometimes nice people get caught up in complicated adult problems. These conversations exhausted me, requiring emotional labor I'd never anticipated as a mother. But they also represented progress, our ability to discuss truth openly, to process pain together rather than hiding it behind smiles and secrets the way Richard had taught them. By late December, the supervised visitation reports showed improvement. Richard was engaging more appropriately, accepting responsibility when the children asked difficult questions, and demonstrating understanding that rebuilding trust was a long process. The parenting coordinator recommended transitioning to unsupervised visits in January, starting with brief afternoon outings and building toward overnight stays if progress continued. I wrestled with mixed feelings about this development. Relief that the children would have more normal access to their father, but anxiety about relinquishing control, about trusting Richard after he'd proven untrustworthy. Yet I recognized my responsibility was teaching the children healthy boundaries, not punishing their father indefinitely through them. Their relationship with Richard is separate from mine, Michael reminded me. He failed as a husband and lied to you, but his capacity to be an adequate father isn't predetermined by that. He can be a terrible partner and still be a decent dad if he chooses to prioritize them. The question remained whether Richard would make that choice consistently. But withholding opportunity to try wasn't fair to Tommy and Emma. As Christmas approached, I made decisions about new traditions. We wouldn't go to Richard's family gathering this year. Too raw, too complicated. Instead, my sister returned, and we celebrated quietly at home, the children opening gifts in pajamas, baking cookies that burned slightly because we were laughing too hard to watch the timer. Richard saw them Christmas afternoon for 3 hours at the visitation center, bearing gifts I'd been informed about beforehand per court order. Tommy reported that Daddy cried a little, saying he missed them and was sorry for the mistakes he'd made. Emma said Daddy gave her a stuffed unicorn that was really soft and promised to take her to the zoo when he was allowed. Small steps, inadequate recompense for the damage inflicted, but steps nonetheless. On Christmas night, after the children finally surrendered to exhausted sleep, I stood in my backyard under the clear desert sky, biscuit pressed against my leg, and took stock of where we'd landed. Our family had been shattered, reconstructed into something different but still whole. The children were wounded but healing, supported by therapy and stability I worked tirelessly to provide. I was exhausted, grieving, sometimes furious, but fundamentally intact. Richard's betrayal had stolen my illusions about partnership and trust, but it had also revealed my own strength, my capacity to act decisively under pressure, to protect my children even when it meant destroying the comfortable fiction of our family. I'd proven to myself that I could survive devastation and function through it, that I could love my children fiercely enough to choose their well-being over my desire to avoid conflict. The year ahead would bring continued challenges, finalizing the divorce, navigating co-parenting with someone I no longer trusted, helping Tommy and Emma understand their story without poisoning them against their father. But December of 2024 marked the closing of one chapter and the tentative beginning of another. I'd learned that some betrayals are so profound they cannot be forgiven, only survived. That protecting children sometimes means making choices that feel cruel but are necessary. That family isn't defined by the lies others tell, but by the truth we choose to live. And that at 48, devastated and starting over, I was stronger than I'd ever imagined possible, because I'd had to be, for 2 children who deserved a parent willing to face hard truths rather than comfortable lies.